Still the Dean and Harold Washington Professor of Law here at Northwestern. Delighted to welcome you. It is sold out, doesn't look sold out, but it's sort of like a Las Vegas buffet. You know, they advertise the time it's open, and people kind of straggle in and come in a little bit more, and that's fine, because I know it'll be a full crowd. And greetings to those who are on the live stream. I hope that we're going to be able to pump up the volume of outside folks who are checking in and listening in on this conference, which will be live streamed and also will be available on the archive. In fact, I know I don't need this. So I want to welcome you. One of the there are many great things. There are also some not great things. There's many great things about being dean of a law school. One of the greatest things is you can take great credit for the work of others, and that happens regularly. And this is an example of just such a phenomenon, because this conference has really come together, this Global Legal Summit. It's a remarkable sort of collection of folks from around the world to talk about it. Thanks to my blessing, but principally thanks to the very good and hard work of Mark Cohen, who's going to kick us off in a moment. You'll hear more from me later this afternoon, and alas, probably more as the proceedings go on. So on the principle that more is less, I'll simply content myself to say welcome. Those of you who've traveled from long distances, a special welcome. I hope you were able to navigate and negotiate yourself through the weather, which my understanding is you've seen the worst of it. It's supposed to be nice during your time here, and I hope you'll have some opportunity to enjoy the blandishments that Chicago, this part of Chicago, and Northwestern has to offer. One request, we are having this conference right smack in the middle of law school exams. So I would ask you respectfully to, and myself too, to contain your raucousness, such as it is, just acknowledging that around the building are students in a high state of anxiety working on their exams. Perhaps not with paper and pencil, as when I was in law school, before Andrew Arruda was born, but through computers or the like. So welcome. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mark Cohen. Thanks to the wonders of technology and the wonders of less than technology, which is this fabulous brochure that our team put together. You have Mark's extensive bio, and I will not belabor the point, except simply to say that he is one of the great thought leaders and action leaders in our profession. And by our profession, I mean not just the profession of lawyering, but the profession of the way in which that we in the United States and throughout the world provide legal services. So with that, I turn the podium over to get started. And again, welcome Northwestern.
Thanks, Dan.
Sure.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you. First off, I'll say that I hope that there is not some sort of a Paul's-Graphian causal connection between the late arriving crowd and the fact that I was supposed to be the first person to give the remarks. It's really great to be here, and just a special word of thanks to my friends and fellow travelers who have literally traveled from around the world to join us today, and thanks also to Northwestern for the foresight to recognize that this is really a global legal community that we are living in today. And I think the international perspective has never been more timely and more important than it is. And why do I say that? Well, you know, for so long, law was really known for its conservatism and adherence to precedent. Now, all of a sudden, we're talking about law with words like innovation and disruption. Imagine that. Law has always been very provincial in that lawyers, take the states, for example. We have 50 states, and each state has its own bar with its own regulations, and is really tailored to keep sort of interlopers away. That includes, lawyers from other states, things like having to appear, ad hoc, vice, and all that sort of stuff. Not many professions have those kinds of artificial and geographically based restrictions. And yet now suddenly we're talking about a global legal community. Law has always been very much operated as a guild. The guild has been constructed by lawyers for lawyers, and let's be frank about it, we could also add the words middle-aged white lawyers for the benefit of their peer group and future generations just like them. Now it's changing. Law is suddenly, we're using words like diverse, we're using words like people who are multicultural, we're using terms like flex time, agile workforce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's safe to say that all of this really is a footnote to one thing in my mind, in terms of what is the bedrock of change. I believe that the bedrock of change is culture. That legal culture is something that is in the process of being changed. And many people would contend that, oh, it's AI that's going to change everything, or maybe it's blockchain that's going to change everything, or maybe it's regulation that's going to change everything, or maybe it's finally the end of the billable hour, or maybe it's procurement's entry into the marketplace. You could go on and on and on, ascribing different causes. My own view is that it is going to be an interaction of all these different causes that is going to and is already showing demonstrable signs of effecting change in the legal profession and industry as we have historically known it. So to those legal purists who say, why is this guy talking about industry? We are a profession. Let me take a moment to comment on that. We are certainly a profession. We have a social compact. Our social compact is to represent not only those clients who retain us, but also the society as a whole. Yet you look at how our profession is performing, and you look at the numbers and you say that in the United States, roughly 80% of individuals and small businesses who have a, quote, bet the company kind of case, something that really matters to their lives and their futures. And they are effectively denied access to meaningful legal services. And notice I said legal services. I didn't necessarily talk about representation by a lawyer, okay? So I think we as a profession must do better. And we have the tools to do better, as we've never had tools before. We have technology that is not a magic bullet, but which used with creative people, leveraging off of legal skills, because after all, technology is only as useful. I always compare technology to evidence. Okay, I was a trial lawyer, bet the company trial lawyer for many, many years. And any real trial lawyer knows that there's evidence and then there's admissible evidence, okay? And what makes something admissible? Well, it has to be material and it has to be relative and all that other sort of stuff that we learn in our evidence course in law school and then beyond. Technology also, to be meaningful, has to be designed to address a specific challenge or problem. Otherwise, it really doesn't make any, it doesn't matter. You can have all the technology you want, but if it is not usefully applied to some of law's wicked problems, such as the access to justice crisis, such as the ability to deliver legal services more efficiently, more cost effectively, more transparently, it really has very little value. So we are living in a time now where I would characterize it as the age of the legal entrepreneur. I think this is a wildly exciting time to be in the legal profession and the legal industry. I mentioned profession and industry. Make no mistake about it, law is and has been for quite some time, law is big business. I remember when Steve Brill in 1987 came out with his inaugural American Lawyer 200 survey, where he remarkably was able to get 200 managing partners of the then 200 largest firms in the United States to basically throw open their books and to reveal how much the firm was making, how much each lawyer was producing, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, that was about the only data that law firms maintained. There was no such thing as data about, client satisfaction, net promoter score, stuff like that. But they sure as heck had, notice Dan, I said heck, this is a very sanitized presentation today.
Not mine.
They certainly had a very good handle on the internal metrics that mattered most, which is PPP. And now it's 31 years later, and what has changed? Not a whole heck of a lot, right? Lawyers still have a great command of PPP. They have a great command of how much each lawyer is able to generate. But when you look at things like net promoter scores, very few law firms have really maintained those kinds of records. But others outside have maintained those records. And a recent Cambridge University study revealed that they took a poll of 200 GCs, and they asked what percentage of you would give a positive net promoter score to your go-to law firm. Now mind you, this isn't just a panel law firm. This is when things hit the fan, this is the law firm that you are going to pick up and call. So only 25% of those 200 GCs gave a positive net promoter score, meaning that they would recommend their go-to law firm to another friend or another business, which means that 75% of them gave them the thumbs down. That's not a very good batting average. And I think that that is very emblematic of some of the changes that are going on in the global legal marketplace. And make no mistake about it, these changes are not just going on in Illinois or in New York or across the United States, but they are going on all over the world, as our eminent group of speakers will begin to talk to you about in more detail. These are global changes that I believe are forged by basically several very powerful factors that coalesced and that were really far too powerful for the self-regulated legal industry to be able to withstand with our barriers. So what were some of those factors? Well, one was clearly the global financial crisis and its aftermath, which created a kind of a reboot of the buy-sell dynamic. You started hearing things like better, faster, cheaper, more with less. And I think corporate, not only corporate America, but corporations around the globe started to make more demands for greater efficiency, greater transparency, and frankly, more choice. That sort of coincided with the remarkable acceleration of technological advancements and deployment. Consider that in 2008, around the time of the financial crisis, Amazon was a company, they Freudian slip, maybe they'd become a country. Amazon was a company that was just consistently bleeding lots and lots of red ink, and a lot of people were scratching their heads saying, why are people continuing to sink money into this? We don't really get it. And look at Amazon, a decade later. Smartphones. When was the last time that you were able to walk down the street anywhere in the world without having a majority of people buried on their smartphones? It's giving new life, I think, to traffic cops. These are things that have really disrupted multiple industries. And only lawyers, it seems to me, could have the hubris to believe that with all these disruptions in other industries, whether it's ride-hailing, whether it's hospitality with Airbnb, Amazon with retail, the list goes on and on and on. How could we have the hubris to believe that this isn't relative to us or this isn't going to happen to us? Consider our professional brethren, the doctors. And when I was a student, the really smart kids generally went to medical school, and sort of the BS artists like me, who really didn't want to particularly take the hard science, would go to law school. So doctors are a pretty smart group of people. And for a long time, they operated very much the way lawyers do. That is, they had small practices, and they delivered medical services. Consider that 20 years ago, when you go into a physician's office for your annual physical, you were with the doctor probably 90% of the time. I remember the first time that the doctor said to me, well, you're going to have your blood drawn, and the phlebotomist is going to come in and do it. And I said, wait a minute, what do you mean? I want you to do it. And she said to me, no, the phlebotomist will do a much better job than I will because she does it 100 times a day. Fast forward 20 years, what's happening today? You go into the doctor's office for your annual physical. The physician looks and says, hey, Mark, you put on a couple pounds. Are you still exercising? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? That takes about 5 minutes. What's going on in your life? How are you doing with your sleeping, etc.? And the next probably hour is spent with paraprofessionals hooking you up to machines and collecting data, okay? And data that is tied to two benchmarks. One is, sort of the industry standard benchmark. What do, people of this person's, age and whatnot, what's their cholesterol, what's this, what's that, and then a bench line that's tied to you individually. How did you do last year relative to this year? So on and so forth. And then, 5 or 10 minutes before you see the doctor at the end of the visit, the doctor is in her or his office reviewing the data, and then basically assimilating that data, applying it to general benchmarks, and then applying it to your situation. And finally, you meet with the doctor who says, okay, let's go over the data and let's determine a game plan for going forward. And I ask you, why should the delivery of legal services really be that much different? And let's talk for a minute about pedigree and reputation and how legal buying decisions have historically been made. When I was a trial lawyer and a partner at a big firm, and then I started my own national boutique firm, so many decisions were made, on big decisions in terms of who to hire, on things like what law school did you go to, how well do you know the general counsel, do you belong to the same golf or tennis club as they do, so on and so forth. And of course, relationships are going to continue to play a role in our profession. And let me just inject that I think that with technology having the imprint that it does today, I think that, counterintuitively, the more we are reliant on technology, the more important people skills and EQ is. And I think that law schools, legal providers of every sort, should really place more of a premium on the human side, because at the end of the day, just as you want a doctor who has professional competency, you also want a physician who you can say, if my life is on the line, I want that woman or I want that guy to be doing it. And I will just be very personal for a minute and tell you that about 16 months ago, I had a potentially life-threatening illness. I'd never been sick in my life. It required surgery. When I sort of did my due diligence, and I went around and I said, this is a pretty big decision. This is really, truly my bet the company case, unlike any other I've had to make. What am I going to do and who am I going to select? Do you really think that I looked at whether or not, they were number 1, 2, or 3 in their class at a particular school? Do you really think I cared whether, they were white and looked like, some sort of a Hollywood physician with silver gray hair, although I have to say the doctor I picked did look that way. My wife was quite delighted. No, I mean, I ask questions like, how many procedures of this type have you done? What, have the outcomes been? What are some of the particular issues that you think, are particularly important in terms of my case, either for the positive or the negative? That's how I made my buying decision. And that is increasingly the way law is moving in terms of buying decisions. Because the legal buy-sell dynamic, which was long controlled by lawyers and lawyers alone, lawyers sold legal expertise to other lawyers. Well, now it's changing, because now with technology as a part of legal delivery, and with process as part of legal delivery, you now have practice expertise, but equally you need technological expertise and you need business expertise. In law schools, historically, we have learned the rudiments of legal expertise. Now I think lawyers, the lawyers of the future and legal professionals of the future, that is people who are not licensed attorneys, but who are going to play very important roles in the delivery of legal services. Think physician's aide, nurse practitioner, various types of technicians, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's the direction that our profession and our industry is moving to. And so now suddenly you're seeing the entry of procurement in terms of legal buy decisions. I just saw a stat that said that over 70% of Fortune 500 companies now have their procurement departments involved in the purchase of legal services. I think that number is only going to go up. You see the ascent of legal operations. I'm sure most of the people in this room have heard of CLOC, the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium. Who got it right? And the ACC also has a chapter on this. These are all things that I think need to be on people's radar screens, because all these things are interconnected with other factors like regulation, like media, like technology, like business structures, like marketing, etc. And I think the 80-20 rule is beginning to apply to law, which is 80% of what we're talking about is pretty much the same, whether we're here or whether we're in Singapore or in Europe or Latin America. 20%, I will grant you, may have to do with local practice issues, etc. But make no mistake about it, we are in a global legal industry. It's a trillion, that's T as in ton of money. It's $1 trillion global legal industry. And I am absolutely thrilled and delighted to say that, my fellow travelers, my friends and colleagues have agreed very graciously to come here. So you are going to have the privilege of hearing from some of the really, I think, leading thinkers and doers in the global legal industry. These are folks, who really do not only think the big thoughts, but do the dirty work of blocking and tackling that's necessary to bring about the kind of change that a lot of people very glibly and summarily describe. It's very easy, trust me, it is very easy to talk about innovation. Very few people know what it really means to try to innovate. It is very easy to talk about disruption. It's really hard to disrupt an industry. Trust me, I know, because I've tried to disrupt an industry and got my butt whipped. But having said that, I think learned some very valuable lessons. And I'm very proud of the fact that I think a lot of the things that maybe were not a commercial success at the time are proving to be implemented in the marketplace. So I am cheering for anyone who can use what we did at ClearSpire as a foundation or predicate for moving forward. And no doubt about it, people are already doing it. So without further ado, I'm going to yield the floor and say thank you all for coming, and I hope and expect that this is going to be a very rewarding time together. Thanks.